Okay, hi folks. Welcome to the live stream of Hanging by a Thread Artist Talk. I'm here, Paul Duldig, here with Kerrie, and we're going to be spending the next 50 minutes or so with you, talking through our art, our practice, and giving you a sense of what we're on about. Before we start, of course, we acknowledge the Boonwurrung people of the Kulin Nations and pay our respects to their elders, past and present. Our exhibition is fundamentally about climate change. We came together 2.5 years ago.
That's true.
Yeah, and there's a piece that you'll see on the way in there, which is the Pandanus piece with the prince, which actually started the whole ball rolling. Right. To be honest, yeah, we were in a shared exhibition at the art room, and I saw that work, and I instantly thought, I want to collaborate with that person.
And that was me.
Yeah, so I asked Erica Gofton, who's the founder of the art room, who is this person? Anyway, so we met, and we thought about, let's do an exhibition, and particularly responding to nature, responding to the environment. And so 2.5 years later, here we are. We're thinking in our art about how we can really change our perceptions, challenge beliefs, and also what role art might play in trying to essentially save the mass extinction that's underway at the moment. And there's a lot of science in it, but perhaps the humanities needs to also lift its game, is perhaps one of our thoughts, we humbly suggest. But it's a conversation. We're not trying to scare you off. It's not agitprop, but we are keen to engage with you in a bit of a dialogue. So first up, I'd like to introduce Kerrie Taylor, and Kerrie is going to talk with us about her works.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks. First of all, I would like to give you a little bit of background to myself and my background, and then I'd like to take us into where my work is. But first off, just better put that on. Yeah. Do I need to repeat, do you think?
Maybe so.
I'll just hold it.
Yep.
That's right.
Sort of.
Yeah, that's fine. Thanks.
Yeah, okay.
I just wanted to give a bit of background to me personally, I suppose, as a response to how I've got into the arts. I mean, I'm an environmentalist, have been for about 40 years. I hope that plane's okay. And I have been involved in community action groups in the western suburbs in the past, and have been in terms of environment, and I have been employed as a recycling officer at Maribyrnong Council many years ago, and also involved in a project on food security, Hobson Bay City Council. So there is a bit of a background there, and the other element that informs my art practice, I suppose, is that I'm a lover of the wilderness and pristine beaches and other places I've been. I've been a bushwalker for 40 years, have got into some amazing places in Arnhem Land and sort of Northern Territory, as well as around Australia. So I guess a bit of a background around, what informs my art. And I've also lived and worked in the Northern Territory for 20 years. And within that 20 years, I was living on an Aboriginal community for 2.5 years. And again, pristine beaches, beautiful, fantastic opportunity to explore wonderful coastline and mangroves. And in terms of my arts background, I started a fine arts course in Charles Darwin University about, I did it for about 15 years. I did a elective every semester. And of course, I didn't quite finish a degree because the degrees kept on changing. I well and truly did a degree's worth, but the degrees kept changing, so I didn't actually finalise that degree. And the last, since I've been back in Melbourne, I've been back in Melbourne for 3 years. I've been attending the art room that we talked about, which is an independent art school, really, in Footscray, which is it's been a fabulous learning experience. I'd like to now take us to my work, if we could all get up, and the work's in the front room and down the side, if that's possible. Okay. Hold on. You're right, that's right. Yeah, the front room. We might come back to this one. I hope it's not too hot in here, but so as I said, I love. Oh, what? Just wait. Sorry. Can we fit in? All right. Yes. As I said, I love the wilderness, and I have been really intrigued by mangroves for various reasons, which I'll explain. And what I'm in here is a mangrove, my artistic expression of mangroves. And I just want to paint a picture of what mangroves are like, if people don't know. So we're talking about Northern Territory mangroves, probably wilderness area, Bathurst Island, which is north of Darwin. So it's really difficult to get into it. There's mud everywhere, and you're walking through it. You're knee deep in mud. You're walking through it and you're sucked down. So you're not wearing any shoes because you lose the shoes in the mud. So you're walking on mangrove bits and pieces as well as molluscs and other things. You've got midges and you've got sandflies, mosquitoes, depending on the tides. And the tidal differences, you've got to, if you're walking through for a while, you've got to be careful that you don't get cut off. And also, of course, there might be a few crocodiles around. So it gives you a bit of a picture of what my fascination with mangroves are. And I do sometimes wonder why I chose mangroves, but I'll explain why. And I have got basically an obsession with mangroves. So why am I so passionate about mangroves? It stems from an event that happened on Bathurst Island. So we're talking about a traditional Indigenous community. And like I said, I lived there for 2.5 years. I went on an excursion with an elder. He was taking his grandson out to find mud mussels in the mangroves, and he invited me to go. It was pretty special. So within the mangroves, we're looking for the mud mussels. The elder found 20 very, very quickly, of course. His grandson found about 6 pretty quickly. We were in the mangrove area for about 2 hours and I could not see any, even though I'd been instructed about what to look for. It was just sort of a line in the mud, couldn't see them. And so for me, it was really significant in terms of, deep Indigenous knowledge that we don't know about and what is hidden in the mangroves, but then what is hidden around us. So for me, I have a deep respect for Aboriginal wisdom. And so my work, here it is, I'm wanting to mimic mangrove root environment. So it's strongly layered and richly textured. And most importantly, just to repeat it really, is I want to explore what lies beyond and beneath the mangrove root system, symbolising deep Aboriginal wisdom that we are so often unaware of. And I, having experienced living and working with Aboriginal people for 20 years, there's an amazing amount of information that if we were listening, we could hear a lot and learn from. So I'm also intrigued by mangroves in terms of their environmental importance. Mangroves protect coastal erosion. Mud skippers, etc., etc. So they're a really important part of a food web, or the food web. They're a sustainable Indigenous traditional communities, and I've seen that. They really are an amazing system, so important for the environment. Technique for the work. So I've had about 30 years of exploring mangroves, really. So in wilderness, pristine areas. I've also gone out with Indigenous people many times into the mud flats and the mangroves, looking for mud mussels, conical shells to eat, paranga, and also eating yuli worm, which is medicinal. So back in Melbourne for 3 years, and I visit Darwin every year except for last year, and we know why. And I immerse myself in the mangroves every year, do observational sketches, collect materials, with the idea of understanding the ecology of mangroves more and more. I actually incorporate materials from the mangroves in my work, not so much these, of course, but some more recent work in watercolours and other things I'm doing. So I'm really attracted to the feel, the smell, the sounds. These and these, I've used repurposed materials. It's traditional coiling techniques. There's 2 techniques. This is crochet, a round rope, and this is wrapping. It was important, and you know, I overlap the diverse colours and the textures. So like I'm painting, I'm actually painting. That's what I feel like I'm doing to produce those sculptures. Important environmentally, I use repurposed materials, and of course, to get the colours and the textures, it's taken me months and months and months. And I've gone to op shops, particularly in the western suburbs, and I'm involved in a group called the Loom Room in Williamstown, and a group of creative artists, creative craftspeople have been on the lookout for these materials for me. So months and months of collecting the materials. And then the other, I just wanted to, I just working intuitively, responding to the materials I've got, and then I adapt the images as they emerge, really. So each one of the new metaphors, these ones, which are air roots in the mangrove system, they're called new metaphors. Probably didn't see that, but never mind. They took about 20 hours each, so I did that over a 6-month period, these 17 new metaphors. And these took about 6 months also. When I got to this stage, about the first 1 or 2, I started having an allergic reaction to the acrylic. So most of that is actually acrylic. I thought there was a lot of wool in there, but it's mostly acrylic, which meant that I was geared up with gloves, fully clothed, and a mask. Before I started the trend, I thought. It was this time last year, I was fully clothed with mask, and as we know, in 2 weeks' time last year, what happened? The other work, and maybe I'll have a look at it on the way back rather than stopping and coming to and froing. The other work is prints, and like I said, I was a printmaker to begin with. So there's a range of techniques in that, and it's lino printing and 3 plates, lino plates, and printed in various ways and inked. And there's ink stippling on some of the prints. And the other thing is the threads are traditionally dyed pandanus. So again, from Arnhem Land, I acquired those about 25 years ago. There's a whole process of dyeing that dyeing that pandanus to get that colour. So quite detailed work. So the three, I'm attracted to three-dimensional forms. I like things coming off the wall, which includes those prints, and you'll see the threads from the prints. The colours of mangroves at different tide times, so sunset and sunrise, not quite this vibrant, but certainly the colours of the greens, purples, oranges are there. So definitely extrapolated, but it is from the colours of sunrise, sunset. But also I wanted to make sure that it was sort of joyous. The colours were joyous, and so that thinking of climate change activism with optimism rather than pessimism. So that was really important also. So working and living with Aboriginal people for a long period of time has shown me a way forward to truly listen and embrace Indigenous wisdom about land management and potential food sources. I feel privileged, having been taught by Aboriginal people, and the elder in particular, and taught to really observe and really look at the mangroves as well as other things, to realise mangroves are so important environmentally. And finally, when we finish the artist talk, I do invite you to come in and move around this, in and around, and reflect on the immense knowledge people have and how we can embrace this knowledge. So the Indigenous people have, and how we can embrace this knowledge in understanding and challenging us all to be custodians of our amazing, diverse natural resources. So thank you. So we go back or, yeah, okay. Sorry. Lovely colours. So you're taking off the wall, and these are the mangroves.
Okay, welcome back. Thank you, Kerrie. As always, I always learn something when I listen to you. And one of the nice things about this exhibition is we've actually been, I guess, bouncing ideas off each other for a couple of years now. And some of the colours that you saw in Kerrie's mangroves, the idea of threads, obviously, and also in Danny's work in the middle room, I've kind of adopted, subconsciously stolen, perhaps, and been inspired by in my three pieces here. So I just want to talk with you just for 10 minutes or so on some of the behind the scenes, I guess, aspects to my three pieces, and just give you a flavour of, I guess, what was going on in my mind. And I'd be very interested to hear actually what is actually going on in your mind when you look at it as well, if anything. My three pieces are what I privately called the Grassland Project. So it's my little project over this period of time to really think about native grasslands, and and particularly focusing on the temperate grasslands of Victoria. And they extended, that particular ecological system extended from Melbourne to the west, hundreds of kilometres to Warrnambool and up around Ballarat, and 97% of that land was covered by this temperate grassland. And I won't take a poll, but if who can guess how much remains? About 3%. So it's a shocking devastation in 150 years, and it's been studied extensively by scientists, politicians, land management people, and so on, and documented extremely beautifully in maps, reports, studies, commissions, pieces of legislation, and it's still 3% and going down. And they're a critically endangered species there. The golden sun moth is one which used to be endemic almost across the whole of southern Australia. One of the last populations is in this area, and also, believe it or not, in Canberra, which is interesting. That's kind of partly where I live part-time. So the grassland project. So it all began with about 3 and a bit years ago. I was in South Australia helping out a very dear friend of ours, Andrea Higgs, clear her father's house out as he was moving to a nursing home. And we were just, unfortunately, as you tend to do, we're throwing a lot of stuff out. Right? There's one of the biggest skips I've ever seen out the front of the house, because the family home hadn't been cleared out. And I was just tipping these slides, these 35mm slides, into the skip, just like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, and index boxes and index cards. And I was thinking, what is this? What am I doing? And I held a couple up to the light, and I could see they were little grasses. They were photos of grass. And I thought, well, they look amazing. So I just said to Andrew, do you mind if I take some? She's like, please. And she was saying the story of her life was every family holiday they went on, the car would screech to the side of the road, and her father, who was a plant biologist, would take his photos. So their family snaps were grass. And so I sort of stuffed my pockets full of all these different slides, and came back to Melbourne and thought, what am I going to do with these? So I bought a little slide projector and had a look, and then so the first thing I did was I thought, well, they're really quite beautiful. Like, the aesthetic of them are quite beautiful, I think, anyway, quite beautiful in and of themselves. So the first thing I sort of taught myself was image transfer using acrylic medium onto these blocks. And then I thought, well, how do you display these, and what am I actually doing? I'm not sure. So I kind of invented this system of using these channels and putting programmable LEDs in there. So the piece that's in the darkened room, you'll see, uses that technology. And I have to acknowledge partly the makers community in Brunswick. Thank you, Robin. Oh, hey, I thought you looked familiar. Sorry, guys. Mask on, mask off. It's hard to know who I'm looking at. But yeah, the makers community in Brunswick helped me solder. In fact, I had slaves working for a whole Saturday soldering. Because I showed this piece once before with my own terrible soldering. And yeah, I just didn't want to burn the gallery down this time. So given this is a longer install. So that kind of got me going. And I called that piece If Then. And the idea was kind of almost coming back at some point way in the distant future, and someone trying to recreate what a field of grass might have been without any context, without any understanding except these images. That's one interpretation of it. So if then, I guess, is the logic of that. In that also had to learn programming, which is something I am not able to do. So I need to come back to the makers community and keep going with that. But then I thought, okay, well, I kind of really like the use of the light. I like the aesthetic of scientific slides, and I just started talking at the art room about this piece. And Ilona Nelson, who works at the art room, came back the next week with the entire audiovisual collection of the Maryborough Secondary College. So I've got years to go of this. So if anyone's interested in coming back, a couple of decades worth of work here. And, anyone who went to school in the days of slides, which I certainly did, remember the Jacaranda Press? Remember the Web of Life? Remember all those population ecology slides? And it's in and of itself, it's just beautiful. They're in beautiful little cabinets. And but I started looking at these slides, and there's the classic sort of onion cells and reproductive organs and all this sort of stuff. And I've played around. Sorry, guys. Here we go. We just called the cops. Yeah. Do you want me to fire it up? It's a bit of a design flaw of the gripping thing. Yep. Okay. So as I said, I've got years to go, but I thought, well, I really liked using plastics. Why don't I actually sort of explore making my own? So I started to explore epoxy resin and how to manipulate that using inks and different drying techniques, metal fixatives, you name it. The little alchemic studio at the back of our house has got it, and also I've included flowering gum stamens as well as part of that sort of red thread of the discussion. And again, it's got a science feel to it. And the second piece then is there's that what I've called salvage ecology, and that is very much about the Victorian volcanic plains. So if I guess what I read it, when I look at it, I actually read it as a landscape, and you've got perhaps the idea of remnant green areas, then red and orange encroaching, and you've got it's also quite feels like a laboratory to me, and sort of people are making things, and then out of the middle comes this image, which is the indigenous grass, Poa morrissey, which would have been endemic to the region. And the thinking there is really that the maps that they show on the websites of this area, and as I said, you just look up Victorian volcanic plains if you're interested. There's been a lot of money spent on documenting the decline, I can tell you. A lot of people's jobs, a lot of people in very important positions with committee meetings talking about how whether it meets all these different criteria. It's almost like applying for an arts grant or something. Meanwhile, it's all dying, right? And so I don't want to sort of sound too negative about the people's efforts, because they are documenting, but the people actually, that seems to me, the people out in the field actually doing something about it seem to be all volunteers. And the Indigenous Nursery Collective that grows the Poa morrissey, for example, and the people on the ground actually, going to the working bees and whatever. So there is that tension between the way we've industrialized, I think, the scientific perspective on these things. And salvage ecology is kind of taken, a term I kind of half made up, although like everything, when you Google it, someone else has already thought of it, but the last reference I could find was 2009. I got it from the idea of salvage anthropology, which is when people would go into Indigenous communities to document, because they assumed this ain't going to be around for much longer. Well, let's save it for science, if not for not for real life. So salvage ecology, similar sort of concept. I hope it's also nice to look at. I hope it's kind of aesthetically pleasing, because that's trying to essentially open up a bit of a conversation. I'm not trying to scare people off or close off any conversations. You can actually touch the little resins if you want, and pick one up, have a look. So it's supposed to be quite an accessible piece. The third piece is kind of pretty conceptual, but again, for those of us of a certain age, it might feel like going back to school. The orange plastic chair and the slide projector and the little screen and what have you. But the message that's on that, if you look at it for more than 2 seconds, you'll notice it's the same message every single slide, which is that effectively man has learnt to control the environment, and there's nothing to see here, it's all fine. That was literally word for word, font for font, from the slides collection that I was given by a learner, and it's population ecology case study number 7, man, and the first 6 were different animals that were and plants and so on. And so it was well-meaning. We were taught about the environment, we were taught about the impact of disease and climate change, but we were kind of given a relatively reassuring message that, by and large, we've pretty much controlled things, and it's going to be fine. And how long does it take us to sort of get out of that constant messaging? It's still around today. There's still people who would believe that, would have that as their starting point, and that's fine. But I'm just trying to have a conversation with whoever wants to have a conversation about that actually perhaps not being a frame of reference that's sustainable. And within that, where does the art come in? Well, I guess the artist and art itself is one of the things I have learnt is you kind of have to see what's there. You can't, if you put your own assumptions into it, it won't be very good art. So you actually have to really see, particularly if you're doing things like life drawing or anything that's from real life. And I'm really taken with the Nobel Prize winner E. Cavall, Santiago Ramon E. Cavall, who his Nobel Prize in, sorry, I'm talking to Noah. Yeah, in what year? But microscopes were just invented, and he looked at brain cells under the microscope. But he was also an artist, and they couldn't photograph the pictures, so he was actually just doing effectively blind contour drawings of what he saw, and discovered the brain neurons. And people had looked down the microscope before and not seen them, assumed they couldn't be there, had other belief systems about what they would be seeing. So the idea that, we often think we'll believe it when we see it, but actually it's often the alternative, that you see it when you believe it. And the artist actually needs to just capture and document and pursue what's really there. So that's kind of also what I'm playing with. So I hope that kind of makes a bit of sense, and really encourage you to have a look and engage with it however you want. I was given advice that you shouldn't say too much about what was the thinking behind things, because I should leave it up to the audience, but what the hey. Anyway, so no, really keen to see what you think and what you might, how you might respond. So
any questions?
That's
too?
me.
Yeah.
Now we do have time now for questions. We've kept.
If you'd like.
Yeah, we did have a 90-minute version. But the advice. I didn't have the advice we did take was no. 15 minutes. So we've achieved that. So we've got quarter of an hour for questions. If you have any. No pressure if you don't. Anything springs to mind?
Yes, that's
Kerrie. I'm just imagining your home with all these things strung up. Did you actually assemble it in its current form, in structure? Or did you sort of just have that in your mind's eye?
I trialled it once at the art room, and I was going to trial a few times, but the reality is the space is so different. So the install took about 13 hours. So, there was a whole heap of processes around getting it up there and, positioning it, using fishing line, and then eventually taking the fishing line away after it'd been suspended from the ceiling. So there was a whole process. But, the first stage probably was about 3 hours of actually positioning and then pulling the threads in the way that I wanted to. Actually, and then I kept going back, so a long install. Yeah.
Actually, it looks like it was made for that space to me.
Well, that's lovely. That's a very nice. Thank you very much.
I'm just wondering if you had sort of like a space at home where you actually had things, because the way it all dangles down is just so delicious.
Oh, that's fantastic feedback. Thank you very much. But it was. We came to the gallery about 3 or 4 times. I mean, we came about 2 years ago, and then So we got a really good sense of the gallery too, and the light. So I was a little bit nervous, I must admit, but I did have a good from Lyndon. I must have to mention from Lyndon. We had an installation technician who was fabulous.
Absolutely, yeah.
Fabulous. Tom Sullivan, might as well say his name, is fantastic. But the thing he did say it was the longest install he's done. We finished at 10 o'clock on Wednesday night, but came back and did another 3 hours on Thursday. So anyway, yeah.
No, we should definitely acknowledge Lyndon and Melinda is here, the director. If I can give a plug, the latest show at Lyndon New Art is amazing. Nicholas Volland, Troy Emery, and Ash Keating. Yeah, it's stunning stuff, and it's just down the road. So if you want to make a day of it, come along to both. But also, yeah, Melinda helped us in 2 ways, actually. We were just remembering. Firstly, the fabulous Tom, who we might have broken by the experience. He may never come back to work for you, Melinda. But also, we, as part of the art room, we attended a presentation by Melinda about applying for an exhibition. So we were there madly taking notes and went back that weekend and wrote the submission to the Alternating Currents, who were very pleased, accepted. So that was fabulous. Eileen,
Are you a scientist as well as an artist?
No, so my background is actually economics, which apparently, not that I'm putting myself in these ranks, but apparently there are some quite good artists who actually did study economics. Wilma Tobacco, for example, and a few others. But at school, my favourite subjects were physics, art and craft. So I kind of always had that sort of scientific side to me, but no, I'm an amateur. Yeah.
I was going to say, it's so beautiful, your work, and so gorgeous. You can just imagine it hanging somewhere really special, like, foyer of what comes to mind is something like the foyer of a museum or gallery or something like that. So, can you imagine where you'd want to see it, or would you imagine it being broken up into different things? I mean, I can't imagine it being broken up.
No.
But what do you think? Where would you like?
I mean, it is new work, so I mean, I'd love it to be exhibited for a few years in like art prizes, but the size of it limits it really. I think I'd love it to be in a public art space, really. And a few people have suggested I think it would need to be a bit bigger, and I thought that would be fine. Except that the reality is I've got a certain amount of yarn left, and I mean it would change things. I got additional yarn, different colours, different textures. So I've probably got enough for one more piece to join that, but. It would be fabulous to be in a public art space, but if anyone's got any ideas of contacts or anything like that, please let me know. I've got no idea. I actually haven't thought that through, really. I think spent time to get to this point, and and it's great. I have had that comment a few times, so I probably need to follow it up somehow. So yeah, thank you.
Can I ask the same question for what would you like to see with your work? Is it separated, or do you see those pieces being separated? Or as a piece kept together?
I guess my heart says keep it together and my head says no one's going to buy something that crazy. There's a lot of repetition actually in my work, as it turns out. So there's 81 slides, 750 resins. These guys saw me belt sanding all of the little seedling pots. 200 of those, so to some extent I can make more, and if people want, if a more accessible way into perhaps owning a piece of it is to actually have more of that, more resins, more of the blocks, whatever, then I'll think about doing that. It is, one of the really interesting, this has all been so interesting, so different from my normal other career. But yeah, one of the learnings really, and you talked about this just a moment ago, Kerrie, is installation work is not finished until it's installed. And so, you know, whatever you might dream up at 4 in the morning, or, you know, it's finished, right? My phone's ringing, which is sort of one of the problems of using your. So it's actually hard to imagine. Like, I'll keep going with it, but it's hard to imagine other spaces because I'm actually responding to a space. The cupboard with the slide projector, I feel really well proportioned for that sort of insanely small space. But will there be another cupboard somewhere? Probably not. The blackened out space, I think every time I do that, that'll be different. But I'd love to keep going. Absolutely, of course, yeah. And I think the salvage ecology piece, that was actually in my mind different. And the guys from Makerspace might remember it was actually supposed to be vertical and horizontal, but basically both practicality and responding to the space. It's horizontal, and I think it's actually far better. So it's really, really interesting process to sort of see what you might respond to. The other thing I might just follow up actually is you talked about yarn, running out of yarn. So there's actually a lot of salvaged stuff in all of our works. So Daniela's got some fishing line in hers, because hers is about underwater worlds and pollution, and that was fishing line that was salvaged from a beach on Northeast Island land. And there's just a lot of rubbish washing up on those shores. Toothbrushes, cigarette lighters, you know, clothes, shoes, thongs, from essentially north, Indonesia and wherever, Papua New Guinea, whatever. But it's quite challenging. But so she's incorporated a piece of that. The orange chair in the little school room, that was Andrea Higgs again, who was driving to our beach house at Christmas and said, "I've just seen your chair on the side of the road." So I went back the next day and popped it in the car, and we drove home from Melbourne with the chair in the back. And your yarn,
certainly all that front room is repurposed. So all the mangroves and all the new metaphors, and meaningfully, I was really important for me to do that as certainly part of this exhibition, but just generally, even the new metaphors were those small air roots were finished 2 years ago. So it was prior to this exhibition. But because I'm an environmentalist, that's what I want to incorporate in my work as much as possible. Yeah.
Any other questions? Yeah? No? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for the questions.
All right. Well, and thanks for those watching the live stream. We'll be we're here for another couple of weeks. We close on the 20th of March and open Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Just look up the website and hope you can come along. Thanks, Kerrie.
Thanks very much. It was great.
Cheers. Bye-bye.